section, this passage is entitled, Jesus Walks on the Water. But it's a story about a miracle. But I think if you ask Peter, what is this story about? Peter would say, oh, this is a story about the day Jesus saved my life. Jesus was walking on the water, and that was pretty cool. But I was sinking. I was going down forever. And I called out to Jesus, and he reached out and grabbed my hand, and he pulled me out of the deep. So today, we're talking about mental health and mental illness. And just this morning, I read an article on the U.S. Navy's website about a new program they're starting to try to prevent suicide among sailors. And there was this one sentence that really fit with today's message. The more a difficult topic is discussed open and honestly, the more it breaks down the taboo and stigma. Recognizing that we all need help at different points in our lives is key. So true. So to give us some context, I'm just going to share one statistic with you today. It's estimated that about 1 in 4 people in the United States will experience some form of mental illness in any calendar year, any 12-month period. So 10 or 12 of us in this room, either currently or sometime in the next 12 months, will probably have symptoms. So this applies to us. So I have three points in my message today. The first one is, it's okay to talk about it. So I'll tell you a little story. When my father was about 40 years old, he became very ill. And he was evaluated and treated by physicians, and he got better. And while he was sick, he got get well cards and flowers, and people came to visit and cheer him up. And it was great. When I was about 40 years old, which was just before the turn of last century, I became very ill. I was evaluated and treated by doctors, and I got better, and that part was good. But while I was ill, I didn't get well cards, I didn't get flowers, and nobody came to visit me. And the difference was, my father was ill with a physical illness. He had pneumonia. And we're all pretty comfortable with things like that. But I was having mental illness symptoms. I was having severe depression. And we don't really like to talk about that too much. And the truth is, I didn't want to talk about it either. I didn't want to tell people, that I had depression. I felt embarrassed about it. I thought it was a sign of weakness on my part, that I just needed to put on my big girl panties and get on with life. And the problem was, I couldn't even find my big girl panties, let alone put them on. So I just didn't want to talk about it. So Teresa talked about it for me. I was mortified. So he started telling our friends, Benny's getting treated for depression. He's on Prozac. He's going to do great. I'm so glad. I'm not just dying. I'm an introvert. I don't even like to talk about myself when things are going well. And I was worried. I had this fear that people would think of me differently, that our friends would see me differently, that they would be afraid of me, they'd think I was crazy. And I was worried that they would push me away, that I'd be ostracized, I guess. And when Teresa started telling her friends at church, they did treat me differently. The first Sunday back at church during fellowship time, people came up to me and started talking to me and gave me words of encouragement and support, love. Some of them even shared their own struggles with mental health. And instead of being ostracized, I felt like I was enveloped in their arms of love. So it's okay to talk about it. In fact, it's important to talk about it, because if the people who care about us don't know what we're going through, they can't be there for us. They don't know that we need their help. We talk about other health problems. We talk about our heart, gallbladders, our hips, our knees. We even talk about our colons and our bladders. It's okay to talk about our brains too. So that's number one. It's okay to talk about it. Number two, It's real. Mental illness is a real thing. I saw a cartoon once. It was in a clinic where I worked, and it depicted single-session psychotherapy. And it showed a picture of the patient sitting in a chair while the therapist slapped him across the face and yelled, "Snap out!" If only it was that easy, if you could just snap out of it, but you can't. You can't snap out of mental illness any more easily than you can snap out of pneumonia or snap out of a ruptured appendix. It's there. You got to treat it. You got to deal with it. Here's what Reverend Dr. Kathy Pickett wrote a few weeks ago in response to Robin Williams' death. She said, "Robin Williams suffered mental illness that plagued him throughout his life. Unfortunately, mental illness and all that goes with it is still a stigma in today's world. Over the past 3 years, I have participated in and/or officiated 3 funerals as a result of individuals suffering some form of mental illness. The typical response to this cause of death is they took their own life. My response to this understanding is they didn't take their lives, the illness did. Like any other illness that takes over one's body, mental illness takes over one's mind, brain function, and chemical balance." It's a real thing. So I want to try to give you an idea of what I experienced and what it was like. When I was still getting worse and kind of spiraling down, I had lots of symptoms like insomnia. I'd wake up all through the night, my brain wouldn't turn off, I was always worried about things, I had anxiety during the day. It would take every ounce of energy inside me to focus on just doing one thing at a time. Someone I know who had depression once said he would sit on the side of the bed, he would look at his feet and he would say, "How in the world am I ever going to get those shoes on my feet?" It's just overwhelming. I also had a symptom called anhedonia, which kind of sounds like, a Greek goddess, but it's not. Anhedonia is the inability to experience pleasure. And at that time, nothing in my life gave me pleasure or made me feel good. I was just emotionally dead in that regard. The only things I experienced were unpleasant and uncomfortable. Everything was just unsettling. And I remember I was drove into this coffee kiosk and I was going to get my daily mocha. So I think coffee and chocolate still gave me some pleasure. And as I drove in, the woman who was working there was just finishing a conversation with someone who was going to trade a work shift for her so she could go do some things with friends. And she was really excited and was talking about, "Oh, this is going to be awesome." And because the way my brain was functioning then, what I thought was, I feel so sorry for you. Because you think you're going to go do these fun things, but what you don't realize is that life has no meaning. And there's not really any reason for any of us to be here. She thought she was going to go and enjoy life. And she didn't realize that joy was just an illusion and that our existence here is just pointless. And I felt so sorry for her. And that's not normal thinking. But that was my reality. I had no control over what my brain was doing. It was just misfiring left and right. And the psalmist says in the passage that Joy read, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And that's just how I felt. I felt lost. My brain was telling me there's absolutely nothing that's going to help you feel better. You're never going to get well. There's no hope. Writer Anne Lamott, who grew up with Robin Williams, wrote this after his death. "It feels like you were just left here one day with no instruction manual and no idea what you were supposed to do, how to fit in, how to find a day's relief from the anxiety." Another thing I was experiencing was I was always thinking about dying and being dead and thinking about suicide and ways it might happen. actually had been going on for years, and it got to where it was a daily thing, and it just felt normal to me. You know, it's just, well, I'm not going to kill myself today, but I think about how I might do it if I decide to. And then after I had been treated for my depression, well, before that, you know, I would see patients who were being treated for depression, and they would sometimes say, I've been thinking about dying. And we would talk about, you know, how we were going to deal with that, but I would sometimes say, well, that's normal. Everybody thinks that sometimes. Yeah, it's just something we do. After I'd been treated for my depression, one day I realized I hadn't thought about killing myself in like 2 or 3 months. The thoughts just went away. And I thought, oh, maybe that wasn't normal. At least not as often as I was thinking about it. So number 2 is, it's real. It's a real thing. The number 3 is my favorite. Number 3 is love. So, on my lowest day, I was driving to work. We were living in Eugene at that time. I was driving on the interstate and thinking, well, today's a good day. If I wrecked my car, then my death would look like an accident, and then my family would still get my health insurance. It was very logical thinking here. But that morning, I had a guitar in my car with me. This guitar over here. My favorite inanimate object in the world. And I thought, well, if I wreck my car, it's going to cause serious damage to my guitar. No way I'm going to do that. I mean, I was going to die, but I didn't want my guitar damaged. You know, it's the one instant where that illogical, irrational thinking of mental illness saved my life. So I made it to work that morning. And during the day, during that morning, Teresa and I started having this conversation through email. And remember, this was last century before text messaging. So you could send an email to somebody and check your email and answer back. And at some point during our conversation, I said something about having suicidal thoughts. And Teresa said, well, maybe you need to get medical treatment. And I said, I'm ready to put an end to the way I feel one way or another. And then I just stopped responding because I was tired. I was done. So I was sitting there in my office. About 20 minutes later, my pastor walks through the door of my office. And he said, hey, Ben, Teresa called. She said you're having a rough day. Well, that's a surprise. And before he sat down, my boss walked in. And who was the medical director for Peace Health, worked at another clinic. He said, hey, Ben, Teresa called. She said they're having a rough day. Yeah. So Teresa's father has this saying that when something's not going right, he says, do something. Even if it's wrong, just do something. So she did something. She put her love into action. So the 3 of us sat there and talked, and we made some plans, but the thing that was most helpful about it was that they were there. They were there because they cared about me. And it kept me going for a little bit. So, remember I had my guitar with me. Well, the reason I had my guitar with me that day was, it was Ash Wednesday. And I was going to play guitar to accompany the youth choir at the service that evening after work. At that point, I still wasn't sure what I was going to do with myself, or do to myself. And so I called the choir director and said, I don't think I can come to the service. Could you play piano for the choir? And she said, well, I already have another commitment. I can't be there. There's not really anybody else who can do it. But, the choir could probably sing their song a cappella. If you can't be there, that's okay. I said, no, that's okay. I'll be there. And then, I thought, I'll just figure out what I'm going to do after that. So I went to the service, and just being in the church, my church, felt so comfortable and familiar and warm. And in the psalm, where the psalmist starts off saying, God, why have you forsaken me? Later on he says, but you, Lord, don't be far away from me. You are my strength. Come quickly, help me. So as part of the service, we were invited to write a prayer on a piece of paper and then burn that piece of paper in a big metal bowl down in front of the church. So I wrote my prayer. Please help me get out of this hole. And I burned the paper and watched the smoke go up to the ceiling in the church. And I knew I was going to be okay. So, what was it that saved me that day? Well, eventually medication and counseling helped, lots of prayers. But the thing that saved me was the love of other people. And the love of my wife, who put her love into action and do something. The love of my pastor, my boss, who just dropped whatever they're doing in the middle of the day and came to just be with me. The love and the connection that I had with our church. If I didn't have that connection with the church, I wouldn't have had my guitar with me. I might not have made it to work that day. And I wouldn't have had any reason to be at church that night. And the love of my church friends who treated me differently when they found out I was suffering. They came to me and they enveloped me in their arms of love. So the take-home message for those of us who might be struggling now or in the future is there is hope. As long as there is breath in our lungs, there is hope. And it gets better. We can hold on. So what can we do to help each other? Well, the Reverend Adam James Shoemaker offers this. Don't miss an opportunity to tell those you love how you feel about them. Share with others the difference they've made in your life. Be patient with those you struggle to love, and be more understanding of what might be going on in their lives. Don't be afraid to reach out to those you may not know, but who might be touched by your efforts. Even those of us who are struggling can help each other. Anne Lamott says, gravity yanks us down. Even a man as stunning in every way as Robin. We need a lot of help getting back up. And even with our battered, banged up toolboxes and aching backs, we can help others get up. Even with for them to do so seems impossible, or at least beyond imagining. Or if it can't be done, we can sit with them on the ground in the abyss in solidarity. Today's scripture from Matthew tells us after Peter failed to walk across the water to Jesus and he started sinking fast, he called out to Jesus. And Jesus reached out and grabbed his hand and said, I got you, buddy. So it's all about love. We are Jesus to the world and we are Jesus to each other. Reverend Shoemaker has a favorite blessing. It says, life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who make the journey with us. So be swift to love and make haste to be kind. So my 3 points. Number 1, talk about it. It's okay. Number 2, understand it's real. And number 3, if one of us is sinking, we need to reach out with love and grab their hand